Imagine being married 6 times and having the power to execute, exile, or imprison anyone who crosses you, including your closest allies. That was Henry VIII, a king of charisma, athleticism, and ambition, a man whose obsessions would spark religious revolutions, ignite political wars, and terrify the people closest to him. By the end of this video, you'll understand how a young, charming prince became one of history's most notorious monarchs. A man whose love, lust, and paranoia left a trail of tragedy and legacy that shaped England forever. Henry was born in 1491 and the second son of Henry VII and Elizabeth of York. He grew up as a healthy, athletic boy in the royal palace, an England where life was short, dangerous, and politics often deadly. If he were alive today, he'd probably be the kind of kid every school wanted on the football team, fencing club, and debate team, all at the same time. But there's a catch. Henry's family tree was complicated. His parents were first cousins. Marrying within the family was common among European royalty. It kept power and wealth consolidated, but it also meant a higher risk of genetic issues. Imagine your CEO cousin marrying your other cousin, so the company stays in the family, except now add crowns and swords. Henry's older brother Arthur was supposed to inherit the throne, but in 1502 Arthur died unexpectedly. Suddenly, young Henry, only 11 years old, became the heir apparent. Overnight, his life changed. No more carefree tournaments or jousting for fun. Now the weight of an entire kingdom rested on his shoulders. To understand Henry VIII and the monumental impact of his decisions, we first need to step back and look at the England he inherited. It was a nation recovering from decades of turmoil, still fragile from civil wars, and facing both internal and external pressures. When Henry VIII became king in 1509, England was only a generation removed from the Wars of the Roses, a brutal conflict between the houses of Lancaster and York. Families had fought over the crown for decades, with blood spilled in nearly every county. It was a nation exhausted by conflict, and Henry VII, Henry VIII's father, had spent his reign trying to stabilise the monarchy. Think of it like inheriting a company that's been through multiple hostile takeovers and still has angry former employees plotting behind your back. That was Henry VIII's England. Economically, England was primarily agrarian. Most people lived in small villages, farming to survive. Trade was growing, but England was still far behind the wealthier nations of Europe, like France, Spain, or the Italian city-states. Inflation was an issue, especially as Henry VIII's lavish spending on palaces, banquets, and military campaigns increased. It's like running a modern business on a shoestring budget, but living in a mansion the size of a small city. Religion was central to life. England was staunchly Catholic, and the church was the largest landowner and single most powerful institution. Monks, nuns, and bishops wielded tremendous influence, not just spiritually, but politically and economically. Imagine a corporation that owns almost half your country's real estate, dictates laws, and can excommunicate the CEO if you step out of line. That's the kind of authority Henry would later challenge when he broke from the Pope. Politically, England was cautious. Henry VII's reign had been focused on consolidating power, avoiding war, and securing the throne through strategic marriages and diplomacy. He built alliances, collected taxes carefully, and avoided the kind of grand battles his son would dream of. In short, England under Henry VII was stable, but fragile. Henry VIII inherited a kingdom that was peaceful on the surface, but like a glass vase filled with water, it could shatter at the slightest disruption. Now, before we continue with Henry's first wife, if you enjoy these interesting and hidden history stories, I will kindly ask you to subscribe, as I have plenty more videos coming your way. And after you watch the video, I want to hear from you right in the comments. Was Henry VIII a tyrant or a misunderstood visionary in your eyes? Henry's first wife was Catherine of Aragon, originally married to his older brother Arthur. That's right. The Tudor dynasty already had a history of flexible family arrangements. The marriage was only legal because the Pope granted a special dispensation. Today, that's like marrying your sibling's ex, and somehow getting the government to approve it. Henry married Catherine at 18. At first, their marriage was politically strategic but also affectionate. She was educated, devout, and politically savvy. She bore several children, but only one survived, Mary. And for Henry, a daughter was not enough. He wanted a son, a male heir to secure the Tudor dynasty. Catherine was no passive queen. She had strong opinions and often advised Henry on state matters, from treaties to finances. Imagine a partner who not only corrects your work, but does so with intelligence and tact, constantly challenging you. That's what Catherine did. And while Henry appreciated her counsel early on, it also made him impatient as his obsession with a male heir grew. By the 1520s, Henry's focus on producing a son was consuming. He consulted astrologers, physicians, and theologians. He asked if the stars favoured a male child. Today, it's like obsessively tracking fertility apps, while also demanding your spouse follow ancient medical advice, except with a kingdom's future at stake. In 1525, Henry said to his advisers, "If I have a son, England will be strong forever." That wasn't hyperbole. Without a male heir, the Tudor dynasty risked collapse, and civil war was a very real possibility. Think of it as a modern CEO declaring that the company will go bankrupt without the birth of a child to inherit leadership. Absurd, yet terrifyingly consequential. Enter Anne Boleyn. Young, intelligent, and ambitious, she caught Henry's eye in the 1520s. Anne was sharp, witty, and charming, but she had her own agenda. She wanted power and influence, and Henry wanted a son. Their flirtation began with letters and secret glances and escalated into a full-blown affair in the eyes of the court. By 1527, Henry was obsessed and ready to reshape England itself for the woman he desired. By 1527, Henry's obsession with Anne Boleyn and his desperate desire for a male heir came to a head. The Pope refused to annul his marriage to Catherine. And what did Henry do? He broke England away from the Catholic Church and declared himself head of the Church of England. Think about this. He ignored the most powerful religious authority in Europe and created a brand new church just to get married. Imagine your neighbour telling you no to borrowing their car, and instead of finding another car, you declare a new traffic law so you can drive whatever you want. That's Henry VIII. This split was more than a personal rebellion. Henry used it to consolidate power. He seized church lands, monasteries, and wealth. Thousands of clergy and loyal citizens who opposed him were imprisoned or executed. Sir Thomas More, once Henry's close friend and advisor, refused to acknowledge Henry as head of the church. He was executed. That's medieval cancel culture, but permanent and far bloodier. The dissolution of monasteries alone transferred immense wealth and property from the church to the crown, and nobles loyal to Henry. This move reshaped England's social and political landscape for decades. England would never be the same. Breaking with the Pope over marriage is like a modern president rewriting the Constitution to get a divorce approved, and people dying because of it. That's how high the stakes were. Henry commissioned the Great Bible, the first English-language Bible authorized for public use, showing a mix of piety and political savvy. By asserting religious supremacy, Henry created a model for monarchs using religion as a tool of control. His actions forced European powers to rethink alliances, affecting wars, trade, and diplomacy. Henry's obsession with heirs and control led to 6 marriages, each marked by drama, intrigue, and tragedy. Let's break them down. His first marriage was with Catherine of Aragon. Catherine of Aragon was Henry's first wife, originally married to his older brother Arthur. Their union lasted 24 years, producing one surviving child, Mary, who would later become Queen Mary I. Catherine was intelligent, devout, and politically astute, often advising Henry on matters of state and foreign diplomacy. Despite her loyalty, she could not provide a male heir, which ultimately fueled Henry's obsession with annulment. Catherine resisted being cast aside, appealing to the Pope and foreign powers for support. She remained beloved by the public, admired for her steadfast morality. Being publicly dumped by a powerful spouse yet maintaining dignity, influence, and respect from the people. Her marriage ended tragically with political and personal humiliation, but she never lost her integrity. His next wife was Anne Boleyn. Anne Boleyn's marriage to Henry lasted just 3 tumultuous years. She gave birth to Elizabeth, the future Elizabeth I, but failed to produce a male heir, which ultimately sealed her fate. Anne was intelligent, charming, and ambitious, introducing Renaissance thinking and new courtly fashions to England. She skillfully manoeuvred the Tudor court but became the victim of Henry's wrath and political intrigue. Accused of adultery, treason, and incest, she was executed in 1536. A high-profile celebrity rising quickly to fame, reshaping culture, only to face scandal and permanent cancellation. Anne's influence, however, endured through her daughter Elizabeth, who became one of England's greatest monarchs, proving that her legacy outlived her tragic demise. Next up was Jane Seymour. Jane Seymour was Henry's third wife, and is often described as the only wife he truly loved. Their marriage lasted just 1 year, but it was historically significant because she gave Henry his long-desired son, Edward VI. Jane died shortly after childbirth due to complications, leaving Henry devastated. She was quiet, pious, and politically unambitious, in stark contrast to her predecessors, which may have contributed to her survival during Henry's volatile reign, winning the ultimate prize but losing it almost immediately. Henry buried Jane with great honour, even next to his own tomb, a rare gesture in his marital history. Jane's brief life and death highlight the dangers and fragility of women in Henry's court, even for those who fulfilled his greatest desires. His fourth wife was Anne of Cleves. Henry's fourth marriage was politically arranged to Anne of Cleves, a German princess meant to secure an alliance with Protestant states. The marriage lasted only 6 months, annulled when Henry claimed he was physically repelled by her appearance, calling her a Flanders mare. Anne of Cleves was intelligent and politically savvy, eventually earning Henry's respect as a loyal friend and honorary sister of the king. A blind date set up by corporate board members that ends awkwardly, but you remain on good terms. Though the marriage failed, Anne survived Henry without scandal, avoided execution, and maintained wealth and influence in the English court. Her story illustrates the precarious balance between politics and personal preference in Tudor marriages. And the list goes on with the fifth wife, Catherine Howard. Catherine Howard, Henry's fifth wife, was young, lively, and naive, marrying him when she was likely about 17 or 18 years old, with Henry in his late 40s. Their marriage lasted roughly 2 years. Catherine's youth and inexperience made her vulnerable to court intrigues and rumours. She was accused of committing adultery, a capital offence for a queen, and was executed at the Tower of London in 1542, dating a teenager while being decades older, in a highly scrutinised public setting, with lethal consequences for mistakes. Catherine's tragic fate underscores the brutal consequences of Henry's obsession with control and loyalty, as well as the dangers young women faced in the Tudor court, where charm and beauty were insufficient protection. And finally we reached the last wife, Catherine Parr. Catherine Parr, Henry's sixth and final wife, outlived him, marrying him in 1543. Their marriage lasted 4 years, during which she acted as stepmother to Mary, Elizabeth and Edward, helping reconcile Henry's children and maintaining court stability. She was highly educated, devoutly Protestant, politically astute, and even published books. Catherine Parr's influence extended beyond marriage. She survived Henry, guided the future rulers of England, and remarried after his death. A savvy step-parent navigating a chaotic, high-profile family while maintaining influence and surviving in a dangerous environment. Catherine's survival and intelligence made her a unique figure among Henry's wives, demonstrating that wit, diplomacy and prudence could triumph over the king's notorious volatility. So how did Henry VIII manage all this? He wasn't just defined by his marriages or his dramatic break from the church. He was a man full of contradictions, surprising talents, and shocking behaviours that shaped England in ways people rarely talk about. Beneath the royal robes was someone who constantly reinvented himself, sometimes brilliantly, sometimes disastrously. For one, Henry saw himself as a Renaissance prince. He wasn't simply a consumer of culture, he tried to create it. Beyond writing music, he actually attempted to write theology. His early book, Defense of the Seven Sacraments, was such a strong argument against Martin Luther that the Pope awarded him the title Fide Defensor, Defender of the Faith. Ironically, Henry kept the title even after rejecting the Pope entirely. Imagine quitting a company, publicly trashing the CEO, and still proudly using the Employee of the Month plaque they once gave you. He was also obsessed with surveillance. Henry developed one of the earliest systematic intelligence operations in English history. He placed informants everywhere: foreign courts, monasteries, noble houses, even within his own kitchens. Some reports suggest Henry trusted almost no one in his later years. The Tudor court became a place where even a careless joke could be interpreted as treason. Picture working in an office where every co-worker might be secretly recording your conversations for the boss. His spending habits were astonishing. Henry nearly bankrupted England multiple times. He minted coins with less precious metal to stretch the treasury, causing widespread inflation known as the Great Debasement. People literally felt their money becoming worthless in real time. It was an economic disaster equivalent to a modern government printing cash recklessly and crashing the currency overnight. Henry also transformed England militarily. He invested heavily in the navy, turning a tiny fleet into a formidable maritime force. He built coastal forts, armed ships with new artillery, and laid the foundations for what would later become the Royal Navy, an institution that changed the world centuries later. In this sense, Henry was both destroyer and creator, reckless with finances yet visionary in defence. In his personal life, Henry was surprisingly educated. He could speak multiple languages, played numerous instruments, and loved astronomy, architecture, and hunting. But as he aged, chronic pain and frustration darkened his personality. Leg ulcers, likely caused by a jousting accident, left him unable to exercise, fueling weight gain, mood swings, and paranoia. The once vibrant king became a man haunted by his own body. Perhaps the most shocking truth of all is how much Henry VIII feared being forgotten. Every palace he built, every law he passed, every risk he took, part of it stemmed from an obsession with legacy, and in a way, he got what he wanted. 500 years later, we're still talking about him. All in all, Henry VIII's life was shocking, dramatic, and transformative. His 6 wives were more than partners, they were pawns, players, and casualties in a game of obsession, power, and legacy. His decisions reshaped religion, politics, and society, leaving a mark that still fascinates us today. So when you hear Henry VIII, don't just think of a king with 6 wives. Think of a man whose obsession, ambition, and relentless drive altered the course of England forever.